everyone, this is Ria Pramanik. We are studying our course that is BPSC 144 Introduction to South Asia. So, we are continuing with this unit, and the unit is 4. And today we will be learning about Unit 10, that is Armed Conflicts in South Asia. This unit is very important, and it talks about how armed conflicts in South Asia took place, what are the various reasons for that, how non state and state actors are responsible for these armed conflicts, and how it is impacting the population of the countries, the innocent population of the countries who have no hand in creating these armed struggles, but they are a victim of it. So, we will be studying all these things in our Unit 10, that is Armed Conflicts in South Asia. So let's start with the introduction. The geostrategic location, population profile, and region's contribution to global economy make South Asia one of the most important regions in the world. So since we are learning from past 9 units that how this region is so important, not because of its population that is huge in number, but also the geostrategic location that this region is having. South Asia considered to be one of the most important regions in the world, and each and every activities which are taking place in this region is very much impacting the world politics as well. So, due to its location and geopolitics, historically the region witnessed multiple invasions. So, because of its fruitful geopolitical conditions, the geographical locations, and strategic locations that help others to flourish themselves, being the reason behind why this region witnessed multiple invasions from ancient times, both from outside powers and migration of people from different parts of the world this region has seen. This leads towards diversity in population profile. So, because of the invasion of outside powers and also because of the migration of people, many different people from different cultural backgrounds came together and are settled in this South Asian region, which brings the diversity in the population, and it ultimately leads to a problematic situation where there are many instances where these diversity of the population became the reason behind the imbalance in the peaceful situation. This factor has been one of the most central factors in region's historic, cultural, linguistic, and economic developments. Not only it has negative impact, but it has multiple positive impact as well. Because of this diversity, we could have different historic, cultural, and linguistic, also economic developments that took place in this particular region. The region is also known as birthplace to many of world's religious traditions, with immense diversity in ethnic, linguistic, and cultural practices. So not only this region is strategically good for business and good for any trade, but also this place is highly cultural in their aspects because it is a place of many religions, many languages, many traditions in the world. So this diversity also caused pressures on its pluralistic character in the form of assertion of religious and ethnic identities. So this often leads to extremism, violence, and multiple armed conflicts that the region witnessed in different phases of history. So because of these diversity, this pluralistic character of the population, there are many forms of identities that it has created and many forms of assertion as well. And this led to extremism, violence, and multiple armed conflicts that this region witnessed in different phases of history. So, two of the largest countries in the region, that is India and Pakistan, are nuclear armed nation. This is a very important point that you all have to remember, that the South Asia, in entire South Asian regions, two major countries are nuclear armed nations, and this is very important. Why? Because this fact that they are nuclear weapon countries, it has multiple impacts on the politics that it has played in the international arena. So these two countries are engaged in sustained hostilities fueled by the issue of identity dispute over Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the reason why these two big nuclear power countries they are against each other, and there is a conflict that always exists between these two since they have been made, they have been created, they have been independent. These two countries have fought three wars: 1947, 65, 71, and a limited war in 1999. So during the partition in the year 1947-48, there was a war between India and Pakistan. The second war that held in 1965. In the year 1971, it was because of the Bangladesh liberation, the war happened. And in the year 1999, it was a limited war, not a full-fledged war. So, a strange relationship between the two countries has also fueled internal armed conflicts in India. So, not only these two countries are having external, conflicts that is going on, but it is also impacting, it is also fueling the internal armed conflicts as well in both these countries. So globally, region is viewed as a major source of violent extremism through radical Islamist mobilization and terrorism seen as a major threat to international peace and security. So because of all these conflicts, all these armed struggles, there is also the rise of terrorism, which we can witness from the late 1980s, that the number of terrorist attacks have tremendously increased, and it is a threat to the international peace and security. Almost every country in this region is facing problems of terrorism, insurgency, separatism, and ethnic conflicts. So, not only India and Pakistan, but all the countries that lies in this region, including Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all these countries are a victim of terrorism, insurgency, separatism, and ethnic conflicts. So, nobody is spared in this matter. So, apart from interstate and intrastate conflicts, interstate means one state against the other. And here in international relations, the country word is not being used academically. The academic word for countries or nation is usually the state. We considered state as a country. So, when we are talking about interstate, it means it is between and one country versus the other, one state versus the other. When we are talking about intrastate, it is within a particular state the conflict exists. So, for example, if we are talking about interstate conflict, we can take example of India and Pakistan. But if we are talking about intrastate conflicts, we can say that it is the ethnic conflicts that exist in India, ethnic conflicts exist in Pakistan. So intra means inside. So this is how we can separate these two terms. South Asia has been witnessing conflicts generated by great power interventions. So this is how we can introduce this topic, Unit 10, that is about the armed conflicts. Now let's talk about the changing nature and characteristics of armed conflicts in the region. So, in international relations, interstate armed conflicts or war between or among states have been seen as the dominant form of armed conflicts. So, war is considered to be one of the dominant form of armed conflicts because it has its use of arms and it is interstate. As I told you, interstate means one country versus the other or many countries versus many countries. It could be anything, but when it is intra, it means inside a country, within a country. So, armed conflicts between states are instruments to achieve political objectives. So, why these armed conflicts are happening? The reason is that these armed conflicts are instrument to achieve political objectives. So, there are some kind of political motives to achieve that. People used to go for war. However, nature and intensity of such conflicts have been conditioned by several things. So, what are these conditions that shape the nature and intensity of such conflicts? The first one is the structure of international system. Second is relationship among its constituent units. Thirdly, the technological advancement. Fourth is strategy and tactics that is employed to do that. And the last one is the objectives to be achieved in such conflicts. So what are the objectives that we need to achieve? So there are several reasons for this development. What are the reasons behind this? So why this armed conflict increased? What are the reasons? So the first reason is that in the post World War II international order, there have been a number of developments both at ideological and structural level that have strengthened global norms against war. Then the imperatives of globalization are resultant independence, expansion of mass media, information technology, emphasis on trade and development. These have created an environment where armed conflicts and war are not encouraged. Because if there will be war, the trade will be affected, the business will be affected, and automatically the financial and economic stability of a country will be hampered. So that is why in the post Second World War time, the conflicts, the wars have not been encouraged by any country because there was an example of First World War and Second World War, which shows that how destructive a war can be. So the evolving and expanding global security governance, despite all its limitations, has been effective in driving down the number of armed conflicts in contemporary international order. So there is a revolution in military affairs which made the war very costly. So because of so many expensive instruments, expensive weapons, the war became very costly, and that is why war is not being encouraged. So let's talk about the contemporary armed conflicts in South Asia. We will be talking about countries, how they are facing the armed conflicts and how it is impacting the countries within like the population, how it is impacting. So let's start with the armed conflicts between India and Pakistan. So as we already learned that India and Pakistan both are nuclear weapon countries, and one of the these two countries are the biggest countries in the region, and that is why the conflict between them is also very problematic because first of all they both have the capabilities to fight with each other because both of them are quite large in population and area. They have resources as well. Secondly, both of them have nuclear weapon, and it is very disturbing to know that there is a always a possibility of escalating a war into a nuclear war because both of them have that weapon. So that is why the conflict between India and Pakistan is very serious issue, and we will be learning in this slide how this armed conflicts has been shaped between these two nations. So, the emergence of incompatible vision of nationalities based on two nation theory. So, many of us know what is two nation theory. Basically, it is two nation theory talks about how there should be two different nations because according to Muslim League before independence, they felt that in India Muslims are not being treated at par with other religion, other majority religion, and that is why the two nation theory asks about a separate country, separate nation for Muslims so that they can rule themselves, they can stay peacefully, and they couldn't be discriminated and exploited. And this theory of two nation theory was the basis why India and Pakistan got divided. So it resulted in the emergence of two independent sovereign states named India and Pakistan on the basis of two nation theory. So this created these two nations. So the subcontinent had passed through centuries of common political, social, cultural, and economic history. Both these countries were together at some point of time. Even few years back, 76, 77 years back, almost approx, they were together. There was one part, and because of the partition, these two countries became rivals. So it led to the development of a multi-layer of common strategic and socialization process to both the entities. Creation of Pakistan, process of partition and resultant violence created permanent fault lines between the two countries. So why these two countries are rivals nowadays? Like after they became different countries, independent nations, they are rivals of each other. Why? Because of the creation of Pakistan, many people didn't believe that they should be given a separate country because they feel it should be unified. The India country should be unified. Secondly, the process of partition. The partition process was very brutal, very haphazard, and that is why it resulted in violence. There was a communal riot that goes on, and that is why these two countries became rivals till now. Even today, we can see that there is a mutual hatred between these two countries' population for each other. So, since 1947, mutual suspicion and hostilities between India and Pakistan resulted in direct armed conflicts between the two countries. So, because of these suspicion, these hatred, there is direct armed conflicts where, as we already learned, that there have been three wars that took place between these two nations, and the fourth one was a limited war. So it also caused a number of internal armed conflicts in India in the form of proxy war, hybrid war, and support to terrorism and insurgency in India. So not only India is facing external rivalry with Pakistan, but also that rivalry hampered the peace, the stability of the Indian population, because there were also internal conflicts because of in the form of proxy war, hybrid war, terrorism, and insurgency. So, independence of India also brought with itself a very complex issue of future of 566 princely states and their merger into Indian federal structure. So, we have read about all these princely states in our previous classes, but here it is also important because princely states, the Kashmir was also a princely states, and that created a very huge problem during independence. So these princely states became a very important issue, reason why these countries are still rivals. So issue of merging these princely states were resolved through a judicious mix of political, diplomatic, and military approach. So these tactics were used to bring back those princely states, and this issue these two countries for war. So because of this Jammu and Kashmir region, there was a first war in 1947 between India and Pakistan. So Pakistan, what happened in that war? So Pakistan intruders disguised as tribal volunteers, along with Pakistan's regular troops, invaded the state with an objective to annex it. So Pakistanis sent intruders in the disguise of tribal volunteers so that they could annex Jammu and Kashmir. So this conflict ended when a ceasefire brokered by UN was arranged in January 1949, and a ceasefire line was now called the line of control was established. So this conflict goes on, and it ended because of the intervention of the United Nations. So, despite having a military edge, the decision of the Indian leadership for ceasefire and referring the matter to UN has been criticized by many. So, this is also a kind of there is many voices regarding that decision, and as it kept the problem of Jammu and Kashmir alive between the two countries, causing subsequent problems which the region continues to confront. So it was not like that the issue resolved back then. It is still continuing even after so many years of independence. So the outcome of 1962 war. So apart from the three wars between India and Pakistan, India also had war with China in the year 1962. And the outcome of the 1962 war with China was which weakened the morale of Indian armed forces, and support from the US as a part of the Cold War dynamics prompted Pakistan to plan another aggression in 1965. So whatever was happening in the international arena, according, for example, the Cold War, it impacted the relationship between India and Pakistan as well. So the third India-Pakistan armed conflict was held in the year 1971, which was caused by the internal political developments in Pakistan and their spillover effects in India. So this became visible after the rise of Bengali nationalism in East Pakistan. So when India got independence, the Pakistan was given areas from the western part of India and also the eastern part of India. So the west part was known as West Pakistan and the other one known as East Pakistan. So East Pakistan was dominated by the Bengali Muslims, and there was a Bengali nationalism, a rise of Bengali nationalism that created problem in the internal politics of Pakistan. So this situation became explosive after absolute majority in the elections in 1971. The Awami League insisted upon autonomy for East Pakistan. So Awami League was the leader of the Awami League was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and they demanded for autonomy for East Pakistan, and they wanted a separate, system from West Pakistan, because according to them they are being neglected, they are being dominated, and they are being exploited. So the military rulers of West Pakistan responded with a military crackdown and repression, and that led towards to Bangladesh's asking for help from India. So consequently, about 10 million East Pakistanis fled to India. So this is a very huge number, and during this East Pakistanis, uh, the exploitative behavior of West Pakistan towards East Pakistan ultimately was resulting problems for India, because people were migrating, illegal migrants were very much in number, and they were migrating to India to safeguard themselves, to save their lives. And Pakistan sought to internalize the issue by attacking India on 3rd of December 1971. So the war ended on 16th December after the surrender of Pakistani troops and creation of Bangladesh. So on 16th of December 1971, Pakistan was divided into two halves. The West Pakistan became Pakistan, and the East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So the two nation theory was refuted after 23 years after partition, with the emergence of Bangladesh as a separate sovereign independent nation. So how come the two nation theory was refuted? Because two nation theory talked about that two religion can't stay together, because one, the majority of the religion will be dominating the other one. But in case of Pakistan, when it got further divided into two parts, both the parts was having the same religion. The majority of the population were Muslims. Still, they couldn't stay together. So that is why the two nation theory was refuted. So the Kargil conflict in the year 1999, also known as Operation Vijay, was fought between the two countries from May to July in Kargil sector of Jammu and Kashmir. So it is to repulse armed intrusion by terrorists and Pakistani army regulars in the mountainous region of the state. So the Kargil conflict is an example of active military collaboration between state and non-state actors. Let's talk about the internal armed conflicts in India involving non-state actors. So, what is non-state actors? We will be learning in this slide. So, India has been facing several such conflicts waged by non-state actors. So, prominent among them are Jammu Kashmir as a part of proxy war by Pakistan, multiple insurgencies and ethnic conflicts in India's northeast, and left-wing extremists, also known as Maoist and Naxalites movement in the parts of India's hinterland. There are among 42 groups banned by Government of India under the first schedule of Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. It is for engaging in or supporting the armed struggle against the state. Let's start with Jammu and Kashmir. Since 1980s. So the nature of these current armed forces, armed conflicts can be traced back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. So we can see that how the happenings, the conditions, the situations that is being taken place in the world politics also impact the South Asian region very much. So this led to the creation of infrastructure for religious extremism. So the invasion of Afghanistan by Soviet led to the creation of infrastructure for religious extremism in Pakistan, and that is used as a state policy by both US and Pakistan. So even after the withdrawal of Soviet Union from Afghanistan in 1989, Pakistan continued with its policy of using religious extremism for securing strategic interest against India. So let's talk about the major non-state actors. What are the non-state actors in the state? So the Lashkar-e-Taiba, LET, Jaish-e-Mohammed and Hizbul Mujahideen are principal non-state actors involved in the armed conflict in Jammu and Kashmir. So these groups are Pakistan-based and use religious extremism as their principal method for mobilizing people with an objective of merger of Jammu and Kashmir with Pakistan. So all these names, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Hizbul Mujahideen, are very known terms. We often heard these terms in our news reports. So these groups are non-state actors that are involved in armed struggles, and they try to mobilize people by using the religious extremism. So, among all these three, the Lashkar-e-Taiba is the most prominent and the largest Pakistani-based terrorist organization operating in Jammu and Kashmir since 1990s. So, this Lashkar-e-Taiba is being banned in India, US, UK, European Union, and Canada, and also being designated as terrorist organization by the United Nations. So reports also suggest its close linkage with Taliban and Al Qaeda. So there are also links between Lashkar-e-Taiba, Taliban, and Al Qaeda. The Jaish-e-Mohammed is a Pakistani-based Deobandi group with an objective to merge the Jammu Kashmir to Pakistan. So their motive is to merge JNK with Pakistan, and this group is responsible for multiple terrorist attacks in India, which include the Parliament attack in 2001, then Pulwama attack, and also there was a situation where they killed 42 personnel from CRPF and they killed them. So the Hizbul Mujahideen is headed by Mohammad Yusuf Shah, Aka Sayyid Salahuddin, and it has its headquarter in Muzaffarabad, POK. POK refers to Pak Occupied Kashmir area of Kashmir. So it is one of the earliest groups in Jammu and Kashmir to openly advocate religious extremism and jihad. So Hizbul Mujahideen, they have been their base in the Muzaffarabad POK, and they are inspired by the ideology of Chinese Communist leader Mao. So Mao's theory is being used by Hizbul Mujahideen, and they organized peasant armed insurrection using guerrilla war, left-wing extremism, also known as Maoist or Naxalites. So they have been waging protracted armed conflict against India since 1960s. So this movement started in Naxalbari area of Darjeeling, district of West Bengal, and subsequently spread to different parts of the country. So not only these the Jaish-e-Mohammed and all these organizations, Naxalites movement is also very important to understand that it is also considered to be a non-state actor which is creating problem. So several steps has been taken by the government of India, and the affected states have ensured significant decline in the Maoist violence and geographical spread of Maoist activities. Let's talk about the armed conflicts in India's northeastern states. So there are 8 states comprises of India's northeast, that is Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, and Tripura. So this region of immense diversity in terms of religious, ethnic, cultural, and linguistic landscape. So this entire part of Northeast is very, very diverse in for different aspects, whether it is religion, language, ethnicity, culture, etc. So right since the time of India's independence in 1947, the region witnessed multiple insurgencies. And why these insurgencies are being happening? The first reason is the demand of an independent state. Secondly, they want a separate statehood. The demand is also for autonomy within the Indian political system, and also ethnic clashes. So, available evidence suggests that the insurgent groups operating in the region have received ideological and material support from China, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Bhutan, and Pakistan. So, these countries are also helping. There is being evidences that said that these countries are helping these extremist group here, and that is why the problem is becoming bigger. So let's talk about armed conflicts involving non-state actors in Pakistan. The dynamics of interstate, intrastate, and non-state actor conflicts in Pakistan has been sorry greatly stimulated by, first of all, the religious fundamentalism, secondly, the politicization of Islam, thirdly, ethnic antagonism and threat perception. One second. Sorry for the disturbance. So, we were reading about what are the reasons for the dynamic interstate and intrastate non-state actors conflict. So, first reason behind is the religious fundamentalism. Secondly, the politicization of Islam. Thirdly, the ethnic antagonism and threat perception, sectarian militancy, and also the external influences which is creating problem in these countries, specifically in Pakistan. So the factors provided a fertile ground for the emergence of Pakistan as a safe haven for various terrorist and insurgent groups. So, according to Congressional Research Service report, which comes in the year 2021, Pakistan has been the base of operation or target of armed non-state actors of at least 12 globally designated foreign terrorist organizations. So, this is a very big, responsibility, we can say, or blame that Pakistan had to accept, that there is a base of these 12 designated, globally designated foreign terrorist group organization is working there. So the report has further categorized these organizations into five categories. So what are the categories? The first is globally oriented terrorist organizations. Secondly, Afghanistan oriented terrorist organizations, India oriented terrorist organization, domestic oriented terrorist organization, and the last one is sectarian or anti Shia oriented terrorist organization that is active in Pakistan. So let's talk about the non-state actors in armed conflicts, specifically in Pakistan. The first one is Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan (TTP). So Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is the most prominent and deadliest domestically oriented terrorist organizations of Pakistan. So in the previous slide, we have read about all the motives. So this Tehrik-e-Taliban is domestically oriented. Its three operational goals are, first of all, there should be Sharia law in Pakistan. The demand of Tehrik-e-Taliban is to have Sharia law in Pakistan. Secondly, establishing a unified front to combat the US-led coalition forces in Afghanistan, and also conducting defense jihad against Pakistani security agencies. So this is what Tehrik-e-Taliban's aim is. Next comes the Balochistan Liberation Army, BLA. This Balochistan Liberation Army is also known as Baloch Liberation Army. So whether it is Balochistan or Baloch, it means same. So the group is fundamentally an ethno-nationalist militant group. So who are Balochis? Who are Balochs? So basically that is a particular ethnicity that exists in Pakistan, and they used to live in a land Balochistan area, and they are fundamentally an ethno-nationalist militant group that is active in Pakistan currently. So it operates in Balochistan province, the southern western part of Pakistan, and the adjoining areas of Afghanistan. So historically, its roots lies in the third phase of the Baloch insurgency, with the objective of Balochistan's quest for independence. So, since many years, Balochistan is asking for independence from Pakistan, because, according to Balochistan people, they have been neglected, dominated, exploited, and they have been denied of resources by the main Pakistan areas, because Balochistan is a area where these ethnicities used to live. So they complain that they have been neglected. So the prime objective of Balochistan Liberation Army is to seek independence, first of all, from Pakistan, and to establish a state which they will name as Greater Balochistan. So, with this, we end with the armed conflicts in Pakistan. We will be moving forward towards the contemporary armed conflicts in Afghanistan now. So, the difficult physical terrain of Afghanistan not only made it difficult for external power intervention but also brought a militant tribal culture. So, there is a culture of, militancy in Afghanistan because of its physical terrain, like geographical features of Afghanistan is very harsh. There is very that area is very deserted. There have been hilly areas, and that is why became not it became very difficult for the external power to invade Afghanistan, and it also brought a militant tribal culture there. So as a result, successive empires failed to establish its control over Afghanistan. So because of its geographical features, many empires feared of empires. So this term is very heavy term because it means it is the word which signifies a very huge meaning. So this region, the Afghanistan region, is known as the graveyard of empires. So in the last 4 decades, Afghanistan has been affected by multiple and overlapping armed conflicts. That is also being in the news 1 or 2 years back. That how Afghanistan's condition is so poor. Also, in our previous units, we have learned that how Afghanistan is considered to be one of the poorest nation, not only in this South Asian region but in entire world as well. So, groups driven by religious extremist ideology have been a constant feature in Afghanistan right since the Soviet invasion in 79. So, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan is one of the biggest reason why Afghanistan is still not be able to get out of that situation where there is always a war, there is always instability, and there is always a conflictual environment all over. So after the Soviet withdrawal in the year 1989, after 10 years, Taliban came to power following a protracted civil war in 1996. So Taliban is also a terrorist group which came into power in Afghanistan, and after that the condition of Afghanistan became worse. The Taliban government, recognized only by few countries, including Pakistan, represented a government of radical Islamist extremists. So there are many few countries which consider Taliban as a government, and Pakistan is one of them. Also, because Pakistan is also a ground or a base of so many terrorist organizations, and that is why it recognized Afghanistan's Taliban government as valid. So it supported and gave shelter to terrorist groups. Afghanistan is giving shelter to terrorist groups, including Al Qaeda, which was responsible for terrorist attacks in the US on 9th of September 2021. So the 9 20 2001. There is a mistake here, typing mistake. So the war on terror started after the Taliban government refused to hand over Al Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, responsible for 9/11 terrorist attacks in the US. So the armed conflict ended in 2011 after 2021 in Afghanistan after 19-year, 10-month long armed conflict of Taliban against US NATO forces and Afghan National Army. Let's talk about the major landmarks in conflict. The first is the Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011 in a military operation in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he was hiding. His killing brought to the light once again support Al Qaeda was getting from Pakistan. So, because Osama bin Laden was a part of Al Qaeda, leader of Al Qaeda, that was in operation in Afghanistan, he was hiding in Pakistan. So, it gave us a hint that how Pakistan is supporting Al Qaeda as well. So on September 7, 2021, the Taliban announced the formation of an interim government in Afghanistan led by Mohammad Hassan Akhund. So five of the ministers in the Taliban government are designated terrorists in the list of US and UN. So even after Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, prospects for lasting peace continues to elude Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is one of the country which is always in problems, always in conflict, always in chaos. There is always anarchy that exists in Afghanistan. Now let's talk about Sri Lanka. So we have completed India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Now let's talk about Sri Lanka. So the armed conflict took place between the Sri Lankan government and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam between 1983 and 2009. So LTTE in short form. It has been one of the most serious armed conflicts that happened in Sri Lanka. It has been considered the most serious armed conflicts in South Asia in terms of its intensity and number of killings. So the killings number was huge in this Sri Lankan conflict. So genesis of this armed conflict can be traced back to the persisting tension between the dominant Sinhala group and Tamils since it became independent from the British rule in 1948. So the issue got strengthened by a series of policies that the Sri Lankan government adopted after independence. So, what is this LTTE? LTTE was a principal armed group involved in the conflict between Sinhalas and Tamils in Sri Lanka. It was formed in the year 1976 by Velupillai Prabhakaran. The LTTE fought against the Sinhala majority Sri Lankan government with the objective to create an independent Tamil state, that is Tamil Eelam. So during this LTT conflict, it gained notoriety for being one of the deadliest terrorist organization. So that is the tag which is given to LTTE. It carries out numerous suicide attacks against civilians of all ethnicities, using child soldiers, assassinations of politicians, and military targets. So this is how they were using all their tactics to uh, create a terrorists, create a environment of terror. The LTT was also responsible for killing the former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in a suicide attack in Tamil Nadu in the year May 1991. So the group also killed Sri Lankan President Rana Singhe Premadasa. So this group used to target the political leaders and they used to assassinate them using. There are many tactics that we have learned in the previous slide, how they use suicide attacks, how they use child soldiers. So Sri Lankan government has been subject to serious global criticism for violating human rights and committing war crimes through attacks and killings of civilians. That is why this LTT group is considered to be one of the most deadliest. Now, let's talk about the armed conflicts in Nepal. Nepal is located between India and China as a landlocked buffer country. So, what do we mean by landlocked country? In our first unit, we have discussed about this in detail that any country which doesn't have a coastline is known as a landlocked country because Nepal is situated in such an area where it doesn't have any sea around it, and because of that, they doesn't have the trade. They couldn't have trade relations properly with the other nations of the world because they don't have the way to trade. So Nepal is dependent upon Indian coasts. So because they use those coasts for their trade purposes, there is a mutual there is a connection, there is a mutual decisions that had been taken between India and Nepal. Not only Nepal, Bhutan is also a landlocked country. Nepal witnessed a protracted armed conflict from 1996 to 2006 between the Communist Party of Nepal, that is Maoist Party, and the government of Nepal. So historically, Nepal had been governed by a system of monarchy which periodically witnessed popular protest for democracy. So always it is the Nepali people wanted democracy, but they were being ruled by the monarchy. There was a demand for democracy in Nepal since many years. So there are multi-party parliamentary democracy was experimented in the country under the constitutional monarchy. So what is constitutional monarchy? Constitutional monarchy is a system where there will be king or queen that will be existing. He or she will be the head of the state, but all the governmental decisions will be taken by the elected representatives. In that condition, we considered it as a constitutional monarchy because according to constitutions, there is a person designated for doing all the governmental things, and but there is a head of the state who is inherited position and not elected. So, a number of internal issues related to underdevelopment, governance deficit, and poverty created conditions for armed conflict. The CPN Maoist was the principal non-state armed actor party to the conflict with an objective of overthrowing the Nepalese monarchy and establishing a People's Republic. In the year March 1995, the CPN Maoists started agitations and preparations and plans for People's War against the state. So, in the year 1996, the CPN Maoists submitted a 40-point demand to the government, which addressed a wide range of social, economic, and political agendas. In the same year, the party launched an armed insurgency against the government. Also, the tactics used by the Nepali armed conflict or the Nepali insurgents was the guerrilla warfare that is very famous in Nepali insurgency, and that is the reason why they are also become very very tough to be in control. So gradually, the insurgency developed into an intense armed conflict and engulfed almost each of 75 districts of Nepal. So the insurgency left at least 13,000 people dead and 1,300 missing. So that number is very huge. The armed conflict ended on 21st of November 2006 with signing of Comprehensive Peace Accord. The monarchy was abolished and Nepal was declared a republic. The CPN Maoists joined mainstream politics, participated in elections, and also headed the government in Nepal. The armed conflict in Nepal is one of the rare examples in South Asia where a protracted insurgency ended through a peace process with insurgent group participating in electoral politics. So that is something very rare example that we can see in South Asian politics, that an insurgency resulted into peace and the insurgents are taking part in the electoral politics. Now we will be talking about the summary and the emerging trends to conclude this unit. So, historically, interstate armed conflicts or conventional wars between or among nations have been seen as the dominant form of armed conflicts. So, we have read since the first slide that how interstate armed conflicts or conventional wars is considered to be the dominant form of armed conflicts, and here interstate armed conflicts we can also use the term war between the nations. So, however, in contemporary global order, such conflicts are becoming less prevalent. Why less prevalent? Because due to global norms against war, first of all, globally there is being a consensus that these terrorist issues are, or sorry, these issues of war is becoming very creating negative impact on the development of the nations. Secondly, interdependence among nations in a globalized world. So, after the coming up of globalization, uh, all the countries are dependent upon each other for various purposes, whether for trade, whether for any other purpose, whether for multinational companies are set up, foreign countries are settling multinational companies in other countries. So because of that, there is a interconnectedness that exists between nations nowadays, and that is why in the contemporary global order conflicts are becoming less prevalent, because there is a mutual consensus, there is a mutual understanding that to develop oneself we can't fight all time, we can't fight with each other. That will only devastate and destruct the condition and not you will not become flourished by doing or going for war. Next is the technological advancement making wars costly affairs. So, with time, there is also technological advancement in warfare, weapons, mechanisms, and that is very costly for a country to invest upon. So, also the fourth reason is imperatives of global trade and economic development. So now no country want to reduce their economic and give all the money for war, or use all the finances, all the economy of the nation in war and lose everything. Because in war, it is acceptable, or it is known that if two parties are at war, whether one party win the war, still the distraction between these two countries will be similar. No country is there which can say that they didn't have anything destruction, they didn't see anything destructive during a war, because not only loss of life but loss of resources, loss of many lands, all these things exist, and war creates destruction whether you win it or lose it at the end. So, intrastate or internal conflicts have become most dominant form of armed conflicts in contemporary and emerging international order. So, interstate armed conflicts reduced, and intrastate, that is internal conflicts, increased in the emerging international order, and that is one of the that is a very great concern for these nations. So mostly they occur in the form. So what are the forms through which these internal conflicts occur? The first is the low intensity conflicts, insurgency, terrorism, revolutionary war, protracted war, proxy war, hybrid wars, etc. So through these ways, the countries are facing the internal conflicts nowadays, that is being in trend in the emerging international order. So, South Asia is an example not only of a complex theater of armed conflicts, but also a region with immense potential. So, since past few classes, we have been reading about South Asia, and we are learning how the South Asia is so important region. It is considered to be one of the most essential part of the world. Why? Because it is having a country with the highest population in the world. Also, the entire population of South Asia is nearly very larger than many countries of the other parts of the country. And also, not only population but the economy, the emerging economical dominance of the countries of from this nation, this particular region, is very important. So it contributes to existing and emerging international order in areas of security and economy. So it plays a very important role in the world politics as well. Emergence of China as a global power in the existing US-led global order is results in favor of India. Importance of South Asia as a region is likely to increase both as a balancer and theater of both conventional and unconventional conflicts. So this area is very much in demand since ancient times, because of its geographical and strategic location, because of its resources, because of its protection, because of its natural resources that it has, whether it's about the land, whether it's about the minerals, whether it's about the all the mines that this area is having. All of that is the reason why India is being targeted since ancient times, and not only India. Nowadays, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all these countries, the entire region was being a target of several invasions since ancient times. Just a second. So later on, also there were many issues that emerged with time, whether it is because of the partition, whether, and the issues typically emerged after this region got independence from the colonial power. Because before that, there was no voice of this region. So when this region became independent from the colonial powers, there were many new countries that emerged, and they faced many issues, and the fight or the conflicts between these issues, between the conflictual issues between these countries became so thick and so intense that it became very difficult to get out of that. And all these conflicts led into the armed struggles between state and non-state actors. So this region is very important, and it creates many important issues, and also this region is very economically powerful nowadays. Also, during the independence time, when India and other countries got independence, Bangladesh got independence in the later stage. So all these countries were third world countries back then. So they were only developing nations, but the progress this region made was immense. Therefore, existing and emerging trends in armed conflicts in the region are likely to have significant implications for global security order. Also, this region, we should remember that when we are talking about the global security order, we should remember that this region consists of countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are the breeding grounds for terrorist groups that we have read. For example, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, Al Qaeda, all these terrorist organizations, even Taliban, all these terrorist organizations are, you can find in these two countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and these two nations exist in this South Asian region. So that is why it also became a highlight for the global world order, that how there is a implication for global security order because of this region. South Asia is considered to be an important example of this obliteration of distinction between state and non-state actors. So these reasons make this South Asian region a very important one. So South Asia has also been witnessing conflicts generated by great power interventions, with Afghanistan being the most prominent example. We learned that how Afghanistan, after the Soviet invasion in the year 1979, became a ground, became a space for war again and again. There were many wars that had been fought. There were many conflicts that had been fought on that land. Conflicts, both armed conflicts, internal conflicts. Non-state actors are responsible for that. State actors are responsible for that. So it became a battleground. Afghanistan, which is itself a very tough location, geographical location is very tough there, as we have learned that how the physical terrain, mountainous area, the desert created so many problems for the region. That war just made the matter more worse for Afghanistan. So this South Asia has been witnessing these conflicts generated by great power interventions. For example, Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, and all these things happened just for the ideological war that was going on between US and USSR during the Cold War years. So, because of the countries, the superpowers ideological conflict, these countries becoming the battleground. So, all these problems were taking place in this region. So, in the next class, we will be continuing with Block 4, that is conflict and cooperation in South Asia. So, in this, we have already done the armed conflicts that we were talking in this session. Next, we will be talking about the territorial disputes and also the water disputes and water sharing. So both these next units are very important for this. This block is itself very important because not only talks about conflict but also the cooperation. So now we are talking about the conflicts that is there. For example, the armed conflicts, territorial disputes, and water disputes. But later on, we will be talking about cooperation as well. So with this, I end my lecture. Thank you.